What's up? Fit here. Welcome to my channel where I help you better understand your body through the lens of sports medicine. As promised, today is going to be part 2 of my knee pain series, so stick around. So last week's video, Exercises for Knee Pain Part 1, we focused on specific stretches and releases that you can do to help alleviate the knee pain. In today's video, Part 2, we're really going to hone in on rehab strengthening exercises that will not only help alleviate the knee pain, but also prevent the knee pain from coming back. Now, the strengthening aspect of rehab is actually very important because usually when we get into issues like overuse injuries, it's because there is an imbalance that's existing within our bodies that is creating excess stress and tension within our joints. And so what we do is when we're strengthening those weaker muscles, we are creating a balance and therefore alleviating and easing on that tension placed on our body in general. So that's how we prevent the stresses and the pains from coming back. As usual, if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing and ringing that bell so that you can stay up to date with all my latest videos on fitness and rehab exercise. Let's get started. So yes, clams is a hip strengthening exercise, and you're probably wondering why we're strengthening our hips when trying to deal with knee issues. Well, it just so happens that strong functioning hips, and when I say hips, I mostly mean glutes. Strong glutes provide knee stability, which then greatly reduces the stresses placed on the knees during movement. So you'll notice in today's video, we're really emphasizing on hip work. And moreover, we tend to be more quad dominant. And generally, with a lot of patients that I do see with knee pain, their quads are overactive and overused. So a good way to balance that out is really strengthening through the posterior chain, specifically into your glutes and into your hamstrings as well. So to perform the clam, we want to lie on our side with our knees bent, and we want to find alignment through our ankles, our hips, and our shoulders along with our head. And we want to make sure that that top hip doesn't really roll backwards. If anything, I'd actually prefer you to roll it forwards a bit. And think about really reaching that top hip away from you towards your feet so that the bottom side ribs come off the ground as well. From here, you're going to engage your core, engage your glutes, and start externally rotating through your top thigh to start lifting that knee up. A lot of times we think about just lifting the knee up and down, but more so I really want you to think about the thigh bone, the femur itself, just rotating in its spot, which then allows for the knee to come up. So this ends up being more of a rotation into the hips, more so than just the up and down lifting of your knee. One major thing to look out for is to ensure that our core and our pelvis is engaged and stable enough so that the top hip doesn't fall back as we open up into that clam position. Generally what happens there is we think about really opening up through the knee as far as we can go, and we compensate by throwing the pelvis back, which then allows us to lift that knee up a little higher. Your main goal is not about how high the knee opens up, but more so how much can you find the turn out within the thigh bone to really isolate through the glute itself. So as the name suggests, for the side lying leg lift, we're going to be lying on our side. The bottom knee is going to be bent at 90 degrees out in front of us. We're going to straighten out the top leg and place that over a foam roller or a yoga block if you do have one. We want to find alignment with our top ankle, hip, and head. And the first thing you want to do is to really engage your core as you draw the navel in, and then reach that top hip away. And we can always rely on our hand to be our feedback, so we'll place that onto our hip just to make sure that we don't feel that dropping back towards our torso. Once we have that stability through the core and the hip, we want to start lifting that top leg up and down. The work needs to happen within the hip here, so not into the outer thigh. And a big thing is to maintain control within the pelvis so that it's not being flung back and forth like so. If you find yourself feeling a lot of the work traveling into your quads and your outer thigh, you can ask yourself, one, are you hyperextending your knee? Are you really over-engaging that quad to keep that leg straight? And two, is your top hip falling backwards, in which that the lift is now becoming more of a hip flexion as you lift the leg versus a hip abduction being completely on your side? And the main reason why we do have an object placed underneath our foot, it's because it's to give us feedback to make sure that we don't drop the foot below hip level. We really want to start at hip level and lift it higher. For the chicken leg windmills, we're going to be lying in a clam position with our knees bent. I like to have a ball and place it behind the back of my knee as I actively flex my knee to engage my hamstring and hold on to that ball. I'm going to think about that thigh as I bring that forwards all the way towards my chest and then bring it up as high as I can go without the hip moving, and then proceed to bring it back behind me and then downwards. So essentially I'm drawing an imaginary rectangle with my knee, but the idea is to keep the core engaged and to ensure that the hip doesn't roll back in any way. And so again, the work really is deep within your hip. So a big thing with this is to really take your time and not rush through it. If you are rushing through it, you're throwing that leg around, it can start affecting the core and hip stability. So really just slow it down and really appreciate the experience and the moments that you're having with moving through every little inch and degree of this exercise. And here again, we've changed the direction, going backwards, abducting up, flexing the hip forwards, adducting down, and extending the hip back. When it comes to bridges, I find a lot of people don't access their hamstrings as nicely as I would like them to. So what I get them to really think about is to ground your feet into the floor and think of creating this drag of your heels back towards your sit bones so that you feel those hamstrings activate. And there is a sweet spot in terms of where you want to have your feet. If they are too close towards your sit bone, when you create that drag, it's very difficult for you to actually engage the hamstrings. And if you have the feet too far forwards, then your ankles come into a plantar flexion in which that your toes start pointing, and then you don't feel so much the hamstring engagement, but you feel more of a calf engagement. So there's going to be a sweet spot right in the middle somewhere where you are able to find that neutral and really feel the hamstrings do most of the work when that drag occurs. And once we find that perfect spot where we feel that hamstring engage and that drag, what we're going to do is you're going to drive the feet down into the floor, squeeze your glutes to drive the pelvis up towards the ceiling. The work should happen in your hips, in your hamstrings. Your core should be supporting here as well. What you should not be feeling is any type of strain or work into your low back. So if we're not careful in terms of connecting into the proper parts of our body to do this exercise, then we might find that our lower back is going to compensate. And so what happens is when we come into that bridge, we're thinking of lifting the pelvis up, we're arching the lower back, and that strains that back. The core turns off here as well. So instead of actually thinking of lifting up off the floor, I want you to think about pushing the ground down to the level below you. And by that push through your feet is what gives you that extension through the hips that brings the hips off the ground. So think more of energy forces going straight down into the floor rather than coming up towards the ceiling. For the flamingo kick-ups, we're going to grab that ball again, place it in the back of their knee. We're going to flex that knee to hold onto that ball. And when it comes to the ankle, if you can just find a nice neutral or even just a dorsiflexion versus a pointed toe plantar flexion, I find that when we point our toes, we really engage our calves a lot. So I'm looking for more of an isolated work throughout the hamstring. So let's just keep it in a neutral or dorsiflexed ankle. And from there, you want to engage your core as you draw the navel up into the spine, tuck the tailbone under coming into a posterior pelvic tilt. And then keeping that squeeze on that ball to really activate the hamstring, we're going to start lifting that thigh off of the ground. The main thing is to not lift so high that the same side hip actually starts coming off the ground. You want to keep the front pubic bone grounded into the floor gently, and that lift only comes into a hip extension and the pelvis does not come off the ground. And that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please press that like button. If there are other exercises that you enjoy doing that help you with your knee pain, please leave a comment below. Let me know. I'd love to hear them. If you'd like more information on what I do as a personal trainer and a rehab exercise specialist, please visit my website, www.fitbyfenton.com. And until next time, have a good one.